This podcast is brought to you by Valena and by Casa de la Zissa.
The Final Frontier podcast. These are the voyages of Jake Boger and Justin Spur. Our weekly mission to explore memories of Star Trek's strange new worlds, to recall the search for new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has had the spare time to go before.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of The Final Frontier. Today we're talking about Star Trek, the original series, Season 1, Episode 4, which is technically the second pilot, so it should be Episode 1, but for some reason it wasn't aired in order.
I was going to ask that immediately. Because I was like, this is giving real pilot energy.
It is a pilot. We're, of course, talking about Where No Man Has Gone Before, which is probably a better title for a pilot, but
that's what I was thinking. I'm like,
I'll be honest though, I liked the first pilot better. Although this is not a bad episode. I just want to be clear.
Really, I guess maybe because I like Kirk more than I liked Pike. I didn't mind this. The last episode had a distinct lack of Sulu, and this one does too.
No, so Sulu's in this episode, but barely.
Okay, so that was another note I had. So there's a background character in a blue uniform that I thought was Sulu, but then I had a moment where I was like, am I just being racist? Like, is he just another Asian crew member?
No,
I'm like, that's Sulu.
No, that is Sulu. So what's funny, though, is if you look at the star dates, though, this makes sense. This chronologically makes sense. So my headcanon is that this was just a delayed transmission through the time-space continuum of the wormhole that is channeling all this information back to the past in the 1960s.
Interesting. So your theory is that this is an earlier adventure in their adventure in the 5 years or whatever.
It is an earlier adventure because this is stardate 1312.4 to 1313.8. Show date is 2265, and the original air date for this episode was September 22nd, 1966.
My first note, obviously, I've decided I really like reading these episode descriptions before I really jump into it. So my note on the episode description this week is just Gary Mitchell gets a full name. The kid last week didn't seem to get a full name. Gary Mitchell gets a full name.
Yeah, well, because Charlie's human. We established Charlie's human. I don't know why. For some reason, I always remember Charlie being one of the aliens, but just a juvenile. But I'm like, oh no, he's a human. This episode was written by Samuel A. Peoples and directed.
Okay, I have a note about that I have a note about Samuel A. Peoples. Is that a pseudonym? That has to be a pseudonym, right?
I have no idea. Maybe. I did kind of chuckle when I saw it. And the episode is directed by James Goldstone. Yeah. This is a very interesting note that I found. So Ernest Haller was the last-minute hire as a cinematographer for this episode. After the first pilot, cinematographer William E. Snyder was unavailable. And he was actually a fourth choice. He was fourth choice for cinematographer. And what's very funny about this is Gene Roddenberry questioned, because I guess Haller was fairly old at this time. So I confirmed also Gene Roddenberry, in fact, does not like old people, because Gene Roddenberry questioned the aging Haller's suitability for the role and questioned what experience he had. To which Haller replied to him, well, I did shoot a little film called Gone with the Wind about 30 years back. So
that's interesting. Yeah, apparently Gene Roddenberry's got a thing against old people. Apparently,
it was. I mean, I saw the trend enough. I'm kind of like.
So, in regards to this being the pilot, being a pilot, I've got Spock in a turtleneck. and
Again,
him and Kirk are wearing him and Kirk are wearing the same color uniform. So my question for you is, did they not settle on colors for officers at this point? Is that why the colors are inconsistent?
they had, but they changed. So okay, so there's a couple. There's a bit of background. I'll try to condense it
When
so we
they
can get into the
shot that
episode.
pilot, I should say.
Yeah, well, but so here's the funny part though. There are three different colors for the uniforms in this episode. It's just that Command is still wearing gold, Science is still wearing blue, but Operations are wearing beige instead of red.
But then how come Spock is wearing the same uniform as Kirk then?
Because for some reason he's wearing a Command uniform.
This
They
is
hadn't.
plot inconsistency.
Yeah, well, they hadn't divvied it out yet. They hadn't divided because you remember in the
Gotcha.
original pilot, everybody's wearing the same color except for the medical
Right.
staff. We can all agree that the gold, blue, and red is
It's just
works,
easier.
and that's
It's
what.
easier,
Yeah,
like simpler. Yeah.
and correct me if I'm wrong here, because like I said, I haven't watched Discovery. They even keep this color scheme somewhat in Star Trek Enterprise, where they're all wearing a purple jumpsuit, but the stripes are the Command gold, Operation red, and then
Yeah.
Science blue. In Discovery, it looks like they do a transitional uniform that's all one color, but then they very
Interesting.
quickly transition into sort of esque, and then this is what the uniform is for Strange New Worlds, which is a continuation
Interesting.
after Discovery. This is the first time in TV history that an hour-long pilot was submitted to a network for a second time.
Yeah, I mean, I've never watched a show where you got to see two. I mean, to be fair, the first pilot we watched, you said didn't go to air, but yeah, it's interesting that the what is definitely the pilot aired so late into the series. Like normally you watch the first episode and that's like this is real pilot energy, and then the second episode is where they've really started kind of figured it out because usually they film pilots like months, at least if modern pilots they film like months in advance before it gets put to series. So maybe the 60s operated differently. I don't know.
Well, our fans in the UK who are hardcore Trekkies just scratched their heads about that because this was actually the first Star Trek episode shown on television in the UK. So their episode order, I guess, is chronologically correct. Whereas the release dates for the first few episodes in the United States were a little bit off because of some episodes not being ready, even though they are chronologically first.
And to be fair, maybe the kids don't know this, but there used to be a thing called syndication. And most networks want to be able to air a show in any order at any point. So you can just turn it on and watch it and not have to, which is why serialization is a fairly modern concept for television. These 6-hour movies would think they were nuts in the 60s.
I know there's at least one two-parter in Star Trek: The Original Series. However, when Star Trek Deep Space Nine was being developed, well, when it was already airing, they wanted to be serialized from the beginning, but they couldn't get the blessing. And then finally, I believe in season 3, they start doing more like 3-4 part episodes, kind of dipping their toe in the water. And it's one of the reasons I really, really like Deep Space Nine is because by the time you get to season 5, especially, it's all serialization. Like it's a straight linear. Yeah.
I'm a fan of serialization. I love serialization because at a certain point, the individual episodes, when you watch enough of them, they start to get dull.
Yeah, I agree. But what's ironic is that Star Trek Deep Space Nine was one of the 2 series that never aired on a proper network. It was first airings were in syndication. And it's like, that was ballsy.
Sorry. Yeah, that is. I should clarify. The only exception I make to this is Law and Order. I can't stand when Law and Order is serialized. It makes it less interesting. I much prefer it and I kind of feel the same way about this, where I like the individual, like it's a mystery, we're solving the mystery, and that I feel I'll tie us back into the episode.
I agree. But this episode begins. The USS Enterprise is on an exploratory mission to leave the galaxy. So once again, the Enterprise is leaving the galaxy, even though later Star Trek canon shows that, like, the whole premise of Voyager is that they get lost in an unexplored quadrant. No, it's the same galaxy, but it's an unexplored quadrant of said galaxy.
Gotcha.
So
interesting. Yeah. I thought it was like they were trapped. The whole idea with that one is that they're trapped somewhere. Yeah,
they're trapped in the Delta Quadrant, which is just another quarter of our galaxy, but it's heavily unexplored by the Federation. En route, a damaged ship's recorder of the SS Valiant, an Earth spaceship lost 200 years earlier, is found. Its recording is incomplete, but it reveals that the Valiant had been swept from its path by a magnetic space storm, and that the crew had frantically searched for information about extrasensory perception, or ESP, in the ship's library computer. The recording ends with the captain of the Valiant apparently giving a self-destruct order.
Oh, a question I had about just culturally was ESP like a big concern for people in like the 1960s? Because the reason I ask is there's Akira, which has a big ESP focus, and then there's, I don't know if you've ever seen Men Who Stare at Goats, but that's based off of a CIA program, like it's not dissimilar to MK Ultra, but like different, which utilized, it's Ian McGregor utilizing ESP. So this made me wonder, was this like a present concern for them in the 1960s that they were gonna have to worry about people with ESP?
It might have been a fascination because they don't come out and say it, but the subtext in this episode kind of points to the fact that ESP is just a thing. It's not a thing for every human being, but it's a thing that's known.
Yeah.
It's been studied.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it's normal, but it's like, it's something that exists. It's kind of like how Game of Thrones, like dragons aren't common, but they're a thing that exists.
Yes,
so when
that's the impression I got as well.
Yeah. So when somebody brings up a dragon in Game of Thrones, even though they've never seen one, they're like, oh yeah, of course dragons are real. It's just many believe they don't exist anymore because they're under the impression that they died out. Even if I remember correctly, even Daenerys is under the impression that the dragons have died out, except she gets the eggs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it seemed to me like. It was a particular kind of person that was particularly not susceptible, but had the quality of being particularly strong in ESP. That's
Correct.
why, what's his face, Gary Mitchell. What happens to Gary Mitchell? But so when Kirk is talking to the crew, it sounds like I was confused. Was he trying to talk? Because it sounded like he was speaking over a loudspeaker, and I couldn't tell if it was internally in the ship or if it was externally. Because if it was externally, I was going to be like, wait, isn't there no sound in space? But it sounded like it was only internally. So
yeah, I believe it was a loudspeaker. And shame on you, sirs. If you ask any Star Wars fan, of course there's sound in space. Even though there's not.
Yeah, but isn't Star Trek meant to be more, I don't want to say real, but like grounded in reality, I suppose?
Yeah, they do. They do make phaser sounds in space, and yeah, there technically shouldn't be. But it's one of those things, I get it, because
boring otherwise.
Yeah, a space battle would not be fun to watch at all. Because it would just...
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I was going to say, I was just impressed by the fact that we get to see our first space battle.
Do we?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's a point where they're trying, well, not space battle, but space action sequence where they're flying through. I called it the purple stuff, the scary purple stuff.
Yes.
But when they're flying through the purple, the storm or whatever, I was like, there was a lot of commitment to pretending that things were going sideways, but it was just them, doing that thing where they turn the camera to make it look like they're falling to the side. Yeah, and there was a lot of commitment. I was impressed. I was like, this is pretty cool. I mean, there was some more of the CGI replacement on the Enterprise. Wasn't a fan of that so much.
Because it just, again, it's the same reason. You know what? It was good artwork, like it was done well, but it was done so well that, again, the juxtaposition between it and the 60s film footage, which, again, there's only so much you can do to enhance it. It was distracting. That's all it was. If that had been in a more contemporary Star Trek show, it would have been like, absolutely, this looks good. But
for sure,
just the juxtaposition.
For sure,
It was funny when I was watching it, though. The first shot of Spock, I'm like, are his eyebrows higher? They are.
Oh my god, his eyebrows look so strange. Like they look they don't look natural. They look like they've been and I'm sure they were shaved to look that way to give them a more like furrowed brow. But yeah, it was just I hate being like, it drives Jordan crazy when I do stuff like he's wearing an obvious wig, or the eye like the best example I can think of is if you've ever seen Oz the Great and Powerful, when Mila Kunis comes out as the Wicked Witch, and I'm like, she ain't got no eyebrows. Like stuff like that distracts me, so I immediately notice like his eyebrows look weird.
Yeah, thankfully that does not stick around. They tone it down. There's a lot of inconsistencies with Spock, and they continue in this episode. For one thing, it's made mention that one of his ancestors was human, and I'm just like, I'm like, no, your mother was human.
I had a question about that. I was like, wait, is that when Spock says one of his ancestors was human? Is that just what they call parentage in Vulcan? Like your
No, this
parents are just
is
your ancestors.
yeah, this is once again a case of they hadn't fleshed out the character yet. They needed an excuse for him because by this point they were obviously going for the fact that Vulcans were anti-emotion, but Spock had smiled,
Yeah.
so they were probably coming up with a retcon. But again, Spock is a smug little bastard in this episode.
Yeah, he so
Like
is.
he even has that, like he's got that little smarmy grin when he thinks he's gonna beat Kirk at chess.
I love that moment where Kirk is like, you're an obnoxious chess player, right?
It's so off-putting because it's Spock, but at the same time, it's just like, dude, you just ugh. And then Kirk beats him, and I'm just like, ah.
I love it when Kirk's like, yeah, you're an obnoxious chess player. He's like, I don't know what that means. Fuck you. Like I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that moment. I enjoyed them.
Yeah, I like the banter, but then you notice too when they get into the turbo lift, Spock is still pouting, but it's implied that this is a normal thing. So that Kirk is constantly beating Spock at chess, and I love it.
I just love the implication that Kirk is smarter than he seems. Like the way later on when the guy's like, "You're a huge book nerd," and it's like, really, Chris Pine would not have let that. Like, I would not have got that from watching the Chris Pine movie.
No, they over time they get Kirk's never portrayed as dumb per se, but yeah, Chris Pine would have not. That characterization just wasn't there. The other thing I noticed that made me like guffaw laughing is the guy there Kirk and Spock are talking to on the screen is identified as Mr. Kelso. And immediately I'm just like, is this a descendant of Michael Kelso from that 70s show?
That's so fun. As soon as you said Kelso, I went, is he going to do that 70s joke?
Yes. In my headcanon, this is the like great grandson of Michael Kelso. And I love that headcanon. Fun fact: he is also chronologically the first on-screen death we see in Star Trek, not in air date order, but in chronological.
Really?
Well, yeah, because we don't see anybody die in the pilot, not a crew member. This is also our first ever appearance of Scotty, who is seen a couple of times. Yeah, but he's wearing gold, or actually, no, he's wearing beige. So
that didn't even occur to me. Yeah, that we're what. Three episodes in, and we hadn't seen Scotty yet. We'd seen every one of the major players, but no Scotty. Didn't even occur to me.
And once again, I think we got some updated CGI for the intro, which again would kind of make sense because this was the second pilot. And I misspoke. Yeah. I misspoke in the first episode, which I edited it out, but I'm going to own it. I said that the original pilot didn't have an intro. It actually did, but it never aired. So they did make one though. So obviously Paramount Plus redid it, and I think they redid it for this one as well. But as our story continues, Captain Kirk decides they need to know what happened to the Valiant. And in the first of many bad decisions, Captain Kirk's career on the screen, the Enterprise crosses.
Just in this episode.
Yeah, that's oof. The Enterprise crosses the edge of
in this episode.
The Enterprise crosses the edge of the galaxy. There, it encounters a strange barrier which damages the ship's systems and warp drive, forcing it a retreat. At the same time, 9 crew members are killed. Both helmsman Gary Mitchell and the ship's psychiatrist, Dr. Elizabeth Denner, are knocked unconscious by the barrier's effect. When he awakens, Mitchell's eyes glow silver, and he begins to display remarkable psychic powers. Yeah, this was a very... even I'm watching all this unfold, and I'm like, that looks dangerous. Maybe we shouldn't drive into it?
I've got a few notes about the scene. Number one, my favorite moment was when the guy put his hand in front of the lady, like, don't let the lady drive. Shh, the men have this. The men have this. And then my other note is obviously the scary purple stuff. And then, yeah, this is the first episode with major ship action. And yeah, once again, 9 dead feels like a massive casualty.
Well, but for something like
the freeze frame on his face, that I feel like we make fun of the kid's face. We got to make fun of the freeze frame.
Yeah.
And the bad contacts, loving the bad contacts. There's no way you can see through those.
You know what? I actually dug the contacts, which again, from the 1960s, you know how those were made? This is actually quite impressive. And kudos to them for wearing them.
Not specifically, but I have an idea. But go on.
They were made by putting tinfoil between two lenses and sealing them together.
Interesting. That makes sense. That
But
makes sense. When you see the effect on screen, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very large lens. And actually, what's funny is in order to see, he had to do kind of this number so that he could see out the bottom of it. But it actually worked.
That explains why he kept putting his head back.
But it worked great for the character because it's like it gives that air of superiority.
Absolutely.
I thought this was inspired by the Hiroshima eyes, but I was incorrect.
Oh, interesting.
I thought that's what they were going for. You ready for some more fun facts? Because there's a lot in this episode. There's a lot of really cool stuff. Gary Lockwood, who plays Mitchell, would later go on to play Dr. Frank Poole in 2001, A Space Odyssey. Just 2 years later.
That's why I recognized him.
This was a different doctor. Gene Roddenberry did want DeForest Kelley from the start. When the show finally got green lit, he did get DeForest Kelley. However, fun fact, and actually I had to go back and look at this, DeForest Kelley is in this episode. He can be seen in the background of the opening scene behind the view screen where Kirk and Spock are playing chess. He's wearing a blue uniform.
Huh. So, like, in headcanon, that guy got fired and, like, Bones took over his job? Or demoted, or
in my head, well, probably retired, I would guess.
Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I went to the darkest place.
Well, so let's think about this, though. So
9 casualties an encounter. It just seemed logical.
Well, but let's think about this, though. Realistically, if you're in command of a starship, the ship's doctor is probably somebody that, if you haven't experienced one there already, you probably want to hang on to him for as long as you can, even if that means, like, your junior ship surgeon or assistant, like second in command doctor is on the ship. Yeah. So that would explain why Bones is there. And it might have just been part of the mission. It's like, hey, you're gonna stay on the ship as the head doctor for the first year, and then when you retire, we'll drop you off at Starbase, whatever, and then Dr. McCoy will assume the role of, head doctor. That's my head canon.
That makes sense. That makes a certain amount of sense.
As a DeForest Kelley fan, I'm glad. I'm glad he got paid. But we do see Sulu again.
Yeah, see, I wasn't sure that was Sulu, and then it made me feel bad.
So Sulu honestly may have just been a guy with a lot of varied interests and just tried a bunch of stuff, because he ends up being a helmsman. But in this, I mean, we know he is a botanist by hobby, if nothing else. And in this one, he's identified as the head of astroscience. So maybe Sulu, hang on here. We can make this make sense. So he goes on to be a helmsman, driving a ship through space. So we would have to have at least a decent knowledge of astrophysics, one would think. But why would he get? But why would he get demoted? Because right now he's head of the astrophysics department.
Well, is helmsman a demotion? I mean, maybe it's something he wants to do instead. Maybe he feels more passionate about driving a ship like an overglorified space chauffeur.
Well, maybe he transfers, though, because throughout the rest of the series, he's wearing command gold. So maybe part of the deal to be in the officer corps, the way he wants to advance his career, because they go into this with Picard. Picard was at first in the sciences.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
And then transferred younger in his career, because they do an episode where he goes back as if, it's the whole "It's a Wonderful Life" thing, where it's like, what if I'd never done this?
One of those.
And then he finds out. But in that episode, he's wearing a blue uniform. So
interesting.
But one thing we can't be sure of is Sulu is a man of many talents.
Not enough Sulu. There needs to be every time Sulu's not on the show. I think if you've ever seen that bit from Family Guy where it's the Asian guy going, Sulu, he's the star of the, and I'm like, Sulu's not the star of the show. He's rarely in this show. Disappointing lack of Sulu.
Yeah, one of my favorite episodes of Third Rock from the Sun is when they go to the sci-fi convention and George Takei is a guest speaker there.
I mean, he's genuinely funny. He's genuinely a funny guy.
Hey, I like me some Sulu, and thankfully we get to see more as the show goes forward.
I'm looking forward to more Sulu.
We are, and we can also look forward to this word from our sponsors.
Forsan Records is proud to introduce the newest album from Valena, including the singles Cut Me to the Quick, and remedy. Valena, Save Me From Myself, available now wherever you get your music.
When we last left our heroes before we tried to sell you something, Mitchell had been still frame shocked and has developed psychic powers.
My first note about Gary Mitchell is that he's kind of a dick. Gary Mitchell is kind of a dick.
He was cool at first. Well, you know what? He was kind of a dick, wasn't he?
No, he shows up and he immediately to Kirk is like, I set you up with that chick manipulating your whole life. And he's like, I married that chick. And it was like, oh, Gary Mitchell's a dick.
But if you retcon it a little bit, because, I mean, this doesn't come up until the second movie, but that little blonde lab assistant may very well have been the mother of his son.
Oh, interesting.
Who we meet in the Wrath of Khan. Yeah, Mary Moon. But as you pointed out, Mitchell becomes increasingly arrogant and hostile toward the rest of the crew, declaring that he has become godlike, enforcing his desires with displays of telepathic and telekinetic power. The shot where he's speed reading and they're surveilling him and he just looks at the camera, it's so good. It's so good.
I did enjoy his performance in this, I will say.
It was so good. It was so good. And like you said, we learned in that scene that Kirk was a professor at Starfleet Academy back when he was a lieutenant. Another bit of forward-thinking technology, which is now only recently coming to pass, is the medical beds in Star Trek sickbay are basically like an advanced smart scale. You know, the kind of scales the kind of scales you step on that'll tell you like your blood pressure, your BMI, your body fat percentage, all that stuff. It's basically what it is. And I think that's cool. I think that should be it, which I think they're actually doing that now, though, because that would be...
Yeah.
And believe it or not, they're actually working on hypospray needles, too. Which, I mean, it's not a needle, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. God,
I think as somebody who hates needles but tolerates them, give me the hypospray.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's theoretically possible because they're working on it. And an article I read a couple of years ago said, we're closer than you think.
Interesting.
Well, because think about it. Your skin absorbs stuff.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the concept of liquid bandage, where you just spray something on and it tightens your skin. Yeah. It makes a certain amount of sense. Yeah. I believe it.
We also once again see the old phasers and communicators from the pilot, but that makes sense because this is also the pilot. Just a different pilot. Yeah. It's the co-pilot, if you will. Science Officer Spock comes to believe that the Valiant crew members might have experienced the same phenomenon. No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, no, you don't say.
So, you're the science officer. Come on.
Right? Come on, man.
If the 8-year-olds watching this show figured it out, I'm pretty sure a Vulcan did. You know?
Right? It was like last episode where it's like, yeah, he obviously has psychic powers, guys. It's taking you way too long to put this together.
It is taking you
way too long.
Especially when the kid's doing this every 5 seconds. Yeah, it's like watching a toddler just load his diaper in the bathroom. Just everybody knows what he's doing.
You know what you do. You know what he's doing.
But he believes that they suffered the same phenomenon and destroyed their ship to keep the power from spreading. He advises Kirk that Mitchell may have to be killed before his powers develop further, but Kirk angrily disagrees. Although, he angrily disagrees, and then 5 seconds later agrees to do exactly what Spock said.
I mean, yeah,
I get it.
Kirk, I got comments. Every episode is going to devolve to me having comments about Kirk's decisions. I just can feel it. I can feel it happening because he makes some bad ones in this. Well, I should say he agrees to some horrendously bad plans.
Although he accepts Spock's alternate suggestion to maroon Mitchell at a completely automated lithium cracking facility.
That was going to be my comment. So their plan is to just leave him on a random planet and just bail. It just seems like a bad plan. It seems like a really bad plan.
Well, it's not like they could kill him if they wanted to. I mean, Spock pointed a phaser at him.
Kind of a dick move, really. It's a bad plan, and it's also a dick move.
A little bit. But they want to maroon him on the planet Delta Vega. Once there, the landing party tries to confine Mitchell, but his powers have become too great. Dun, dun, dun.
I will say that the set design, like, wow, with an asterisk, but when they initially arrive on the planet and they're going into the cave, the background art on the set design
Oh,
looked
it's
really good. I don't know if it
beautiful.
was,
It was a background painting back when they still did that.
yeah,
It's
yeah, it
beautiful.
looks so believable.
Oh,
Stuff like that makes a world. It's a lot of the reason why Star Wars, in my opinion, still holds up is because of like, yeah, like good set design like that. Now it's not, it doesn't remain great throughout the episode, but that initial shot, it was believable. Like it made the planet feel believable. I really thought it was cool.
did you like Spock's assault phaser?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's the sniper gun, right? That's the yeah. I thought that
well,
was strange. I was like, why?
I I first referred to it as an AR phaser, but assault phaser sounds funnier. But it's also the only time in the series that we see it.
You could tell. I could tell. I'm like, yeah, this is the only time we're gonna see this.
Well, because the concept of a phaser, I mean, does making the gun bigger actually do all that much?
No, it's just it's a laser gun, right?
Even worse, it disintegrates matter. So is there? I mean, yeah, there are power settings for like stun and kill, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, do you really need an assault style phaser? I just
Um,
picture Spock. Just in that moment, I'm like Spock's pro Second Amendment, apparently, because he's like, I knew
apparently,
I
Spock's
was.
just into it.
He's like, I knew I was gonna need this. So you don't know you need it till somebody gets psychic powers, and then you need to.
And turns into a literal god. You know, when Gary Mitchell is trying to seduce the psychiatrist, and he's telling her the poetry, and he says this is a great poem from the year 1997, and that obviously made me ask, was there really great poetry in 1997? I don't remember. What was out in
No,
1997?
no. Fun fact, actually, that poem was written by Gene Roddenberry. He wrote it about his.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he wrote it about a tank in the Second World War.
Oh,
So
no kidding. I
yeah,
didn't know that it was I when he said the year, I was like, they just picked a random year. That just made me
well, I
laugh. I
mean,
was like, I don't think there's real memorable poetry in the real world in 1997.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, there's got to be something.
The fact that you're struggling, I sort of feel illustrates my point, but it's fine. It's
Well,
fine.
but here's the thing, though, and this is what you have to, and it's the same for
I'm mostly
music.
just joshing, but
Well, no, it's the same for music, but poetry is probably like I'm trying to remember. Was Edgar Allan Poe super popular when his stuff was first written? I don't think it was.
I honestly don't know. I'm not a big poetry guy to begin with, so I honestly I don't think so. If he's anything like the painters of his era, like a Van Gogh or anything like that, then I can't imagine so.
Yeah,
But
like a
Shakespeare
lot of
was in his day popular, so
I'd say popular in a different way, though. Like, yeah, they were popular, but were they considered like, oh, these will, remain part of the annals of history? It's
yeah, there's
hard.
no way to know that. Yeah,
Yeah, it's hard. Well, it's hard to view it that way when it's contemporary. Because it's like there's
true.
even you see with movies all the time. Like there's movies that get released that do terribly in the theater, and then they become cult classics, and they're
That's fair.
considered
That's fair. It's
and
a fair
they're
hit.
and they're considered masterpieces to this day. And it's like usually takes about 20, 30 years, give or
Yeah,
take.
true.
Yeah,
That's true. That is true.
Mitchell telepathically kills Navigator Lee by strangling him with a hose or actually a
Yeah,
wire, not a
that was
hose.
kind of a brutal death. I was like, this is kind of brutal. I was kind of surprised. I was like, I respect this Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Even though theoretically he's got psychic powers, he could just, like give him a heart attack or aneurysm or
Right?
just snap his.
He can make this less suspicious,
Would have been
certainly.
easier to shoot too, just have Kelso go, ah! And he knocks
Uh,
out Kirk and Spock, taking Dr. Denner with him, who has now also developed ESP and silver eyes.
so is this after they've knocked him out and tried to put him in the knocked him out on his feet and put him in the teleporter?
Oh yeah, they transported him down to the planet and then they put him in a force field room, which the dude can manipulate matter. We saw Charlie do it. He could just get rid of the doors, couldn't he?
Well, that was my question. It's like they seemingly knock him unconscious. I'm like, they can knock him unconscious, but he's a god, so they can knock him out. Like, there's a lot of like him getting what appears to be, yeah, like incapacitated physically. I'm like, but isn't he a god? Would they be? That's where like his entire power set was slight. But to be fair, the argument could be made he was still learning how to use his powers, so maybe that's why he was able to be overcome physically.
You just reminded me of the scene where Kirk and Spock just beat the crap out of him.
Yeah, he's a god. They you would think that they wouldn't be able to physically overcome him, right? That's why I'm like, his power set felt kind of confusing, only kind of.
It is a little OP, but
I also wrote, Kirk is really willing to screw over a friend.
when the friend gets to a point where he can kill you with a thought, I kind of get it, and he is kind of being a dick.
I mean, I guess. And then also after he kills the guy by choking him, says, make it 10 casualties, high body count.
I think it's 9 in this episode, isn't it?
No, they say 9 after the storm, and with the
oh, that's right. Yeah, so
maybe
technically
11.
I was going to say technically, well, it's implied that it's 12, but we confirmed 11 if you count Mitchell.
Okay, I never got to 12, but still, that's a high body count.
We'll get back to the episode in just a minute after we hear from another one of our great sponsors.
CDZ Collegia Musica is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It is a kind of school of music, a concert series, and an agency that promotes the musicians, dedicated artists, and educators who we feature as our performers. The goal of the Collegium is to bring community together through music performance. These performances vary in musical style from classical to jazz, and music from different parts of the world, from India to the Middle East, that'd be like Persia, and Japan, and China. The goal is to also educate us to how music functions not so much as a musical universal language, because there are differences in the way that these languages of music are expressed, but to educate us to be able to be more appreciative not only of the music but the culture it represents. And by doing this, it brings community together.
Well, Kirk wakes up, and the doctor's giving out pills in the 23rd century for some reason. But he tells him, don't give Spock a pill until I leave. And then Kirk runs after the two psychotic gods. He finds Dr. Denner and appeals to her humanity for help.
That's his speech of, you're a psychiatrist! Be a psychiatrist, damn it! And I was like, man, Kirk is passionate about the art of, or the profession of psychiatry. I forgot a line where the psychiatrist, where she says, women professionals do tend to overcompensate. And I said, that's a line right from the 1960s. And my follow-up point, which is why I wanted to know who the writer was, because my other note I have is there's no way a woman wrote this episode. And I got to the end and I was like, yeah, there it is, male writer.
Samuel Peoples. I did chuckle at that
Samuel
line.
Peoples.
I did chuckle, which again points to the fact that maybe, just like with Pike, maybe, and it's laughable, but again in the 60s, maybe they thought it was going to take that long. Maybe women in command positions or officer corps or whatever was relatively new in the Star Trek universe.
Seems that way.
Well, we find out through the other series that is in fact not the case. They've been around for about 100 years or so. Before Mitchell could kill Kirk, Denner attacks him, using her powers to weaken him. And we get another classic Bill Shatner role for no reason. All he has to do is turn around and point the gun at Mitchell. Instead, he does like a 5-foot sideways roll and then has to aim because he rolled, as opposed to turning around and already having the gun pointed at him.
There's a lot of Kirk stuff happening in the later half of this episode that it's everything I was expecting Star Trek to be.
Yep. Also, there's a fun little Easter egg on the tombstone that Mitchell creates. It says James R. Kirk, and it should be James T. Kirk. Obviously, they had not you know,
They hadn't come up with his middle name yet.
yeah, well, I mean, they came out with an initial, which, wow, James T. Kirk sounds way better than James R. Kirk. And I think that might be why they changed it.
Yeah, there's a real pointedness to James T. Kirk that you can like really like enunciate and emphasize. Did they already do the purple stuff fight where they're shooting purple energy beams at each other?
Yes. That's when
my note
Dr.
for that is
Denner...
just the purple stuff is. Oh, okay. My note is the purple stuff is back. It's his one weakness.
Yeah, but and that's what I'm talking about, though. So, like, the space purple stuff looks good, and this purple stuff looks like it's from 1966.
It looks like it's from 1966, but that's I love shit like that. I love that. It's just so charming.
I know. I like it again. It's not bad for 66, but when you CGI update the space shots, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's not matching so well yet.
It's also the first time we get to see some Kirk Fu.
Okay, so what do you call? I don't know what to call. I just called it the Kirk double-handed slam.
Yep, that's Kirk Fu.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite move. And then I got that is a legit hip throw. And it's funny you mentioned last week William Shatner knows judo. I'm like, that is a legit hip throw. Like I was impressed. And then it's not a bad little fight sequence. So I'm like, you know what? This is dynamic. This is fun. It's way less silly than I thought it was gonna be.
It's a little over the top, but actually there's a great video. We're gonna go down a YouTube rabbit hole for a moment. Jesse Enkamp, who has he's a karate master from the Netherlands, I think, but it's somewhere in Europe. But anyway, he does a video with Michael Jai White, which for those of you who don't remember him, he's been in quite a few movies, but he played Spawn back in the Spawn movie from the 90s. Very, very talented martial artist, but he does this thing with Jesse where he talks about, he's like, the thing about fighting in movies is legit fighting doesn't work because it's very unimpressive looking on film. He's like, to make it look cool, everything, first of all, is coming from the outside, because normally how you frame a shot, if you go down the middle, you can't see it, or at the very least, it doesn't look very cool. So that explains why a lot of your fight choreography is really over the top. It's just so that it's visually interesting. So that's why a lot of times, you know, people that are good fighters throw a lot of haymakers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And why Kirk does, you know, double-handed, you know, fists and...
But it makes it memorable.
A lot of cowboy punches thrown on Star Trek.
But he's throwing in some legit, like I say, that is a legit judo hip check, and he's doing some I recognize his judo moves because I'm an MMA fan, so like I recognize some of those moves. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Once you know that he knows some stuff, he's definitely he's exaggerating because he thinks he's like this great actor, but some of it looks okay, and I think when not to criticize a however many year old show, but if they were to strip back the goofy shit, I think those fight sequences would probably look better.
Well, unfortunately, the Star Trek fight choreography gets marginally better, but even, I don't know about Discovery and the later shows, you would think, but even in Deep Space Nine and Voyager, it's still a lot of the double hammer fists and...
Look, I'm okay with it getting worse. I'm okay with that.
It doesn't get worse. It doesn't get worse. To be fair, it doesn't get worse. It's allowed to get worse,
though.
Yeah.
It could get worse. I'm okay if it does.
But one thing I do like, at least in this show too, Deep Space Nine, it's one of the only things that bothers me about Cobra Kai is, Kirk looks like he's been in a fight.
Yeah.
He's got ripped clothes, he's bleeding, he's got some bruising, he looks tired, disheveled.
It's a long enough fight where you're starting to see some actual they're going back and forth for a little bit. I was surprised by how long it went on.
But which I get it. It's part of the corny '80s charm. But the thing about Cobra Kai, I made this remark. I think on our first review we did of it on Average Intelligence. I say it's one of two things: either these kids are really, really, these kids have to be really, really weak because some of the shots they're landing would legitimately put you in the hospital. The way they're making contact.
Two of my favorite movies are Here Comes the Boom with Kevin James.
It's a good movie,
and it's a really good movie. I think I watched it for the show. And Warrior with Tom Hardy,
I love Warrior.
Phenomenal. That's the movie that made me go, yeah, Tom Hardy can be Bane. Like that was the movie, legit. I was like, after I watched that, I was like, he can be Bane. He has anyway. But the big thing with those movies is guys in those movies take way too many hits. Like where you're like, the ref would have stopped this like fight, especially in the UFC. The refs will stop just about anything for any reason in that league. So I'm like, they would have stopped this minutes ago. They wouldn't have let this guy relentlessly pound on Kevin James like he's a pound of meat. But like you said, it's a movie. It needs to needs to look interesting or be interesting. Like if he took one hit to the jaw and went unconscious immediately, that wouldn't like allow for very much drama. Or like if he didn't like in Warrior, he breaks his arm and then continues on fighting. Like stuff like that wouldn't happen. So I get your point.
Yeah,
I get the
not,
point.
but again, it's a movie for sure. The fight choreography and Here Comes the Boom is like legitimately fantastic.
Yeah, I know Kevin James is impressive in that movie, like legit impressive. Like and also Boss Rutan is underrated as a comedic actor. He is very funny. My favorite is kick to the head, victory dance.
Grab him and head, but knee to the face, and throw him back. Stop! What? Victory dance! Oh, victory dance!
Fun fact about that is he based that little routine off of a guy he met at a bar who said that he had like a system that would win any street fight, and that's apparently what it was.
He has a series of videos on YouTube, where he's teaching street fighting. The thing I know about him is that he's a big liver shot guy. I really like the UFC games, and I love getting the liver shots. It's always fun. But anyway,
liver shots and open-handed strikes.
Yeah, super effective. Yeah, and people don't realize that the body going for the body. Everyone thinks of movies and thinks, going for the head, but nah, man, Boss Rutan, he loved the body.
He had a gift, though. I mean, the man could deliver a shot to the liver. Like, and as somebody who's taken a liver shot before, it's not fun. It's not fun at all. It's not fun at all.
But more to the point, yeah. I understand your point about needing to make choreography and fighting look more interesting for the camera. Like you can't just have it be realistic. It wouldn't make for a very interesting television show.
Right.
But I love corny fighting. I love corny acting. Like that's my big thing. That's why I think I love Kirk. It's gonna be hard to make me not love Kirk despite his bad choices, which leads me to my next point at the end of the fight, which is that Kirk is about to Old Yeller his friend. I'm sorry, boy. It's time to put you down. The big rock.
Oh, gosh.
Sorry, he's gone rabid.
Well, to be fair, Gary was trying to Old Yeller Kirk with the rock first.
Yeah, but I mean, who is really being Old Yeller? The guy who's sick? I mean, is the argument not here that he's technically sick in the head? Like, is that not the argument? Really, in this analogy, I feel he's more the Old Yeller than Kirk.
Oh, definitely. And then a note that I made is like, so the assault phaser does nothing, but a falling rock kills him. Okay.
Yeah, well, he hits the falling rock with the phaser, and then and then I couldn't. Okay, so explain to me how the woman died. She was just all of a sudden dying, and I was like, how did that happen? What did I miss?
She used too much power. I don't know. It's again, this is another episode where it kind of gets wrapped up a little too neat with a lot more questions than answers, and it's kind of like, wait, why is she dead?
Yeah,
this doesn't make that much sense, because if you could,
she's not making it to the same.
Well, because if you could just get them to kill each other, and like if apparently they can run out of juice, so I don't know.
My thing was like he was just like, you should be like me, and she was like, you're right, I should be like you, and then she just was. Like there wasn't really like. It was just weird all of a sudden. And also, I get that this is the pilot, but yeah, it really was like, well, she's not making it to the next episode. But this one really wanted you to feel like her and Kirk had this connection that just like evaporates when he's like, well, I'm cool. I'm cool with just leaving my friend on a planet and killing him. I'm cool with that. 15 years of friendship, whatever, you know.
Well, no, I mean, I think they established pretty, which again, you've got an hour-long time slot. I think they established that Kirk is legitimately broken up about it, but the thing is he's so frustrated because he knows Spock is right but doesn't want to admit it. That's the sense I got.
I wanted to point out, I realized earlier in the episode when they were looking over the medical files, we had talked about star dates, and it appears they have a star date as someone's birthday on the medical file. So they do use it to track years then. So my question I guess would have been when did they stop using the or do they have a canonical time when they stopped using the Roman calendar?
I believe, which the earliest chronologically is Star Trek Enterprise, and I believe by then, I can't remember if they have star dates by then or not. They identify the years. I think they're using star dates by then. I could be mistaken.
So my follow-up question was, do you know when they stopped using, or what? Maybe not when, why they stopped using the Roman calendar? Was it just because it was more easier to follow sort of naval kind of coding?
See, my first instinct would be to say because of relativity, but they don't really acknowledge relativity in this series, so
No, that's not true, because they do, because he says the warp, was it in this episode or the last one? I think it was in this one. Kirk when the warp drive gets destroyed, Kirk is like anything that would take us like a couple of hours to get to now will take us like 10 years to get to.
yeah, that's not so much relativity
So
as speed, though. Another wonderful thing in this episode, though, is we get the first of many torn shirts from Captain Kirk.
I mean, man loves his torn shirt.
I tried to find for when we referenced it the first time about Kirk being shirtless. There's an episode of Futurama where it's one of my favorite ones ever because it's so funny, where they get the cast of the original Star Trek back together by an alien that wants to create a permanent Star Trek convention. And
it gives them their bodies back, right?
Yeah, it's a spoof, but it's a spoof of a couple different episodes. But the first thing Kirk does when they like go off to make their encampment is he just tears his shirt off. Or Kirk, I say Kirk, William Shatner.
The other thing about the medical files that was of interest to me was how the person was from New State, which I'm guessing the United States is comprised differently if there's New State. I don't know where New State is, what part of the country it's in.
Couldn't tell you. But interestingly, though, fun fact, what's the name of the town? There's a town in Iowa that Kirk is canonically from. They have a sign
I know this.
that says future birthplace of Captain James T. Kirk. And I think that is awesome.
That is fun. That is a fun fact that I actually knew. I don't remember what the city is, but I know what you're talking about.
That is awesome. I love that.
That is awesome.
That would be so cool if that was from in my town. Actually, believe it or not, my hometown does have a fictional claim to fame, which nobody believes me until I tell them and they Google it. My hometown, Shelbyville, Indiana, is actually home. Bucky Barnes, the original Bucky Barnes, is not from Brooklyn, New York. He is from Shelbyville, Indiana.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
You can look that up.
Oh,
Also, at one point, which she's dead now, but at one point, the tallest woman in the world was also from and lived in Shelbyville, Indiana. And I met her a few times. They had her come to our school because she lived. It was very close. So I met her a few times. And I think at one point, which she's not anymore, obviously, but at one point, the oldest woman in the world, I think, I might have to look that up. I think her last name is something Parker. At one point, she was the oldest living woman. It was also from there. So fun fact.
They just grow them different in Shelbyville, Indiana.
They do. They grow them. Never mind. I'm not going to go down that road. But fun fact, our friend, the author Debbie Lynn, currently lives in Shelbyville, Indiana, the author of the Unveiled book series. So
everyone just coming from Shelbyville, Indiana.
She's not from there originally, which is how I knew she was a good author. She lives there now. Back on the Enterprise, Kirk makes a log entry that both Denner and Mitchell gave their lives in performance of duty. He explains to Spock that he wants his friend's service record to end positively, with the quote, "He didn't ask for what happened to him," which I actually really liked that moment because I get it.
Yeah, me too.
But this is one of many moments where I'm not saying they lie on the captain's log, but they do kind of fudge the record a bit. And I'm kind of I'm like, isn't the point of these logs supposed to be, which actually I did somewhere, I forget what series they talked to about. It's for documentation and for mental health as well.
Yeah, oh yeah. I always thought it was a journaling exercise. That was the whole purpose of it.
It is, but at the same time, it's like whenever you find an abandoned ship, they check the logs, right, to see.
So it also kind of serves as like a black box as well.
Yeah. So it's both documentation but now it's like,
that makes sense.
Well, now you have to call into question every log you come across because it's like, is that really what happened? Because I mean, obviously, if you violate the Prime Directive, are you going to put it in your captain's log? I mean, you should, but
they haven't like said or identified or defined a prime directive for Starfleet yet, right? They're just kind of vaguely exploring. No, I don't
yeah,
think so.
not yet. And Kirk breakdances on that line. And one
I mean,
episode,
he's making some bad choices.
well, no, like in some episodes, it'll be like, we can't violate the Prime Directive. And in other episodes, he's like, what's the Prime Directive? So here's my solution to this, because once again, we have an episode where something else could have been done. Why didn't they just take Mitchell to Talos for it? Same
Well, okay,
solution.
this episode interests me because it shares to me it's a companion piece with the last episode, because the question of like, okay, for me at the end of the last one was, well, why didn't they let the kid become an adult and like learn how to control his powers? But the argument can be made that kid, while he is from a species standpoint human, he didn't grow up as a human. So the powers, in my opinion, didn't corrupt him as a human, because that's the only state of being he theoretically knew. Whereas with Mitchell, his name is escaping me at the moment for some reason. He was human. So the argument of the argument that they make in this episode of power corrupting, I think the power absolutely did corrupt him, and I not that I think he should have been put down like old Yeller, but I just think that like, yeah, the power did corrupt him. Where I think the kid in the last episode, I think he hadn't been corrupted yet, and he could have been good. I think he had that morality. He had the potential for that morality.
It's two different kinds of danger for sure, because like you said,
Yeah.
Charlie's a child and doesn't have the restraint
but he could. That's my point.
He could learn it.
Control?
Mitchell you see is far gone very early, because he had been raised as a human, and it becomes very clear that he is now like, I am above you, insects.
Is my question is, when Kirk first goes to him and in the hospital and he starts being a dick to Kirk, is he already being like influenced by the mojo at that point, or is that's what he's like from a base standpoint? Because if he begins the process of change as a dick, then it's just going to make him more of a dick, right?
Well, very much. They say this about money, but I get you could say the same thing about power too. And this is kind of where I draw, sort of like the Superman dichotomy, is like power like that, much like money, is an amplifier of who you already are. So to that point, I think Mitchell might have always kind of been a dick. Whereas if somebody was just like really good Boy Scout, they get these powers and they're like, Captain, this could be very useful. We need to study this. We need to learn what my limits are. We need to see what I can do, like for the good of humanity.
That's where I disagreed. I disagree with Spock in the sense that Spock was just immediately like, this is going to make him evil. And I tend to be like, no, you got to give it's great Superman quote that I love is, when you kill someone for being evil, you deny them the opportunity to be good. And I think just the automatic assumption that he's going to become corrupted by these powers without giving him a shot almost becomes self-fulfilling in a way.
Well, I think they kind of established that they give him a shot, and he proves a few times that he's not going. But, and I'll play devil's advocate here, you might also have a Dr. Manhattan sort of thing that happens, who over time, for those of you who
becomes
I can't really. Well, I think Dr. Manhattan just becomes so detached, which Mitchell arguably does too. And see, here's the argument though. So, spoiler for the end of Watchmen, at least the movie. Well, no, I've read the graphic novel. I can't remember now. Does Dr. Manhattan kill Rorschach at the end of the graphic novel?
Yeah, that's one.
Okay, I thought so. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, that image of him blowing him up is pretty like shot for shot from the comic.
Well, but here's the thing though, and this is my sort of, not a moral question, like a what if question. If Dr. Manhattan couldn't manipulate matter as easily as he could, would he have killed Rorschach?
Well, it depends. In the movie, he kills Rorschach to hide or to help cover up Flight's plan, because he believes it to be logical.
Sure.
So,
but he has the ability. But he has the ability to disassemble Rorschach's atomic structure. My point is, if Dr. Manhattan didn't have that power and didn't become so detached, would he have had that same mentality? My answer is no, I don't think so. If he is, which he arguably wouldn't have even been there, but let's assume he was there. but hadn't become so detached because he essentially became a god. He can manipulate matter and travel simultaneously through space and time, which I think that's gonna pretty well screw with anybody's perception, because when you're no longer existing,
sure.
yeah, because when you're no longer existing in a linear fashion in time,
Yeah.
I can imagine it becomes very easy to become detached and probably inevitable, which is kind of the point that's the point that this episode makes, kind of the anti-Superman argument, because, like, yeah, Superman was raised, which he gets his power super early, which is kind of why I like Invincible, and it makes sense because Mark doesn't get his powers until he's 17, so until he's a young adult, he's been raised like a normal human with all the flaws and weaknesses.
Well, it depends. If you've seen Smallville, his powers didn't, like, all of his powers don't manifest immediately. Like,
right.
A lot of So, but I think with this, I think maybe it would have been a bit stronger for me if for me, I'm a big fan of an argument for morality. So I think it might have been more interesting if he was like, if maybe we've seen him a bit earlier for a bit longer, and he was just a good guy and he was a nice guy, and we got to see the power actually corrupt him, as opposed to immediately him being like, yeah, I manipulated you into going after this girl I wanted you to, and I'm a big old prick. Like I kind of feel if maybe there had been a bit more softness to him at first, then the transformation of him wouldn't have felt so abrupt to me. I think that's my thing, is like it's just all of a sudden he's evil now.
Yeah, because, like, if this episode had happened in season 2 and we'd been with Mitchell as a crew member all the way up to that point, it would have hit way harder.
Exactly. Like my thing when I was watching this was like, this episode would have been stronger for me if it was a lead character and it wasn't just a guest spot. Like if it was like a Sulu or a Spock, and they don't die at the end, they get turned back to normal or whatever. But
see, that would have been interesting. That would
if it had been someone we knew.
Well, and you could have made
they have to go back and wrestle with it.
Yeah, and the moral of that story, though, and you could have even, this is something that Deep Space Nine honestly would have done. Like, the whole story could have been that Kirk was, again, this is assuming that we'd seen Mitchell, and like maybe we see Mitchell save Kirk's life a couple times, and this, that, and the other, and then Kirk's ready to put Mitchell down, and then Mitchell's able to reassert control and somehow, some way, either control or get rid of the power. And it'd be really interesting to watch Kirk wrestle with that, the fact that he was ready to kill his friend, and that could even come into play later.
Exactly, and he doesn't even have to be like a regular character, even just a reoccurring one who shows up for an episode here or there. You can, there's other shows where it's like you can establish relationship with guest characters that you love. That when you bring them back, and then if you want to kill them, you can, and it doesn't affect your main cast. You can have those consequences to this character. But you know him well, and to be fair, maybe that would have happened had this not been the pilot. Maybe if this were, you're like you say, a season 2 or even later into season 1 episode, maybe maybe they would have done that. But they were like, we just need a shoot it out, make a pilot. The last one didn't work. When this needs to be, and if I'm comparing it pilot to pilot, I think this is a better pilot than the first one.
You know what? I said that I think I like the first one, but upon further reflection, well, obviously this is a better pilot. This got the show picked up.
Well, for me, it's just, once again, way more dynamic. That Kirk fight is, I guarantee you the Kirk fight sold the show. There's no way it didn't.
It's better. It's better than Pike shoulder checking Glass.
Right. Like, I don't know, William Shatner, he just, look, I know that man has an ego that maybe is unwarranted, but man, he's really selling this show for me. Like, he's the reason I'm into this. It's going to be going forward. Okay. Going forward, I guess my question for the future is, every episode going to end with someone dying? Like, because I like to see some happy endings.
There are plenty of happy endings. There's some good ones. In fact, some of them end with a laugh.
Because my impression thus far is that this show always seems to end on thus far, every one of these episodes has ended on a weird bummer.
Yeah, it is kind of a downer. I think the next episode actually has at least not a sad ending. But also, and I forgot to bring this up in our second episode, I believe, but fortunately the number didn't change. Our red shirts tally is still at 0.
I'm paying attention. Don't you worry. I'm keeping track. You know, this week there was no close calls. Like I didn't see any people in red dying.
I was gonna say there were no red shirts, but
no, yeah, there's no red shirts. So no, I keep my account in my notes. If there is a red shirt death, the minute there's a red shirt death, don't you worry, it's gonna be in my notes.
we will.
I'm paying attention.
Yep, we'll definitely bring that up, and we'll keep a running tally for you, the viewer.
Oh yeah.
And this episode again was Where No Man Has Gone Before, the second pilot, the one that got this show picked up for its 3-year run. And join us next time. Unless, do you have any final thoughts on Where No Man Has Gone Before?
I pretty much covered it. I'm excited for the next one.
The next one is going to be a very fun episode next time. Join us next week when we go through The Naked Time.
Ooh.
And nobody's naked, but somebody's half naked in it. I guess that counts.
The Naked Time makes me think it has something to do with like time travel. That's my guess.
It doesn't. The title makes no sense.
I'm excited. My favorite bit is when I open it up and I read the little description and like it barely describes what's going to happen in the episode, or it's like in a way that like Kirk's friend gets godlike powers, and I'm like, whoa, all right, that really vastly oversells this episode.
Did it though?
No, it really didn't. But it oversimplified it. Maybe is how I would put it.
Oh, big time. But it's funny. You think they would make it more appealing because they have such a limited window, but they don't. But anyway, join us next week when we talk about The Naked Time, and we will see you next week on The Final Frontier.
There's I don't want to give the ending away, but we talked about it last week. I asked you if this episode involved time travel, and you said no. You said no. Yeah. Then now that we're on the scene with the butter knife, I just said he's gonna stab him real good with that butter knife.
Sulu, yeah. Well, and actually, I remember watching an older interview with George Takei where he talked about. He said, "Well, when I was a kid, I didn't pretend I was a samurai. I pretended I was Robin Hood."